Hey, everybody. This is Kelly Nielsen here, and you are at Grace for Living After Loss. On this channel, we are completely dedicated to sharing tips, tools, and resources for helping you recover from grief and loss and get back to loving your life, back to a place where you are looking forward to your future, where you are engaged with your present, and where your loved one is an intentional part of your everyday life going forward. That's what we do here at Grace for Living After Loss. And in this video, we're going to be dispelling the 5 stages of grief myth. I call it a myth. A lot of people call it a model. It is a model of care. It is a thought process or a model of care that a lot of people prescribe to. But I want to share a little bit of information and insight about it and the reasons why I believe it's an inaccurate and inadequate model of care for people who are grieving after loss. So first of all, if you're not familiar, let me give you a very high-level overview of the 5 stages of loss, which is also known as the Kubler-Ross method. The reason it's called the Kubler-Ross method is because Elizabeth Kubler-Ross is the one that developed the method back in 1969. So that is actually my first cause for pause as we embrace this model here in 2024 for addressing grief and loss, is that this model was created back in 1969. And I can think of very few things, if any, that we are still doing the same way as we were in 1969, especially when it comes to medicine and mental health and our physical bodies and well-being. So much change has happened. So it's crazy to me that we would still be embracing this model of care. And this still actually is the predominant school of thought with a lot of grief experts and people in the know. They still really embrace this kind of model of care. And yeah, so we will, for the sake of information, I'll share what the 5 stages are, how they list it out with this model of care. So it is denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and then finally acceptance. So according to Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, that is sort of the process that you go through when you are going through loss. Now, another interesting thing that you probably don't know is that the way Elizabeth Kubler-Ross came up with this model is by studying people who were dying, people who had terminal illnesses and were made aware of the fact that their life was going to be ending. That is actually how the model was created. It wasn't created by studying people who are grieving. It was studying people who were at the end of their own lives, which is a very different process. I mean, I don't know because I've never been given a terminal illness diagnosis. So I have not yet been in the process of dying, but it is, I would imagine, a very different mental process to go through. On the one hand, you're contemplating your own mortality and you're trying to make arrangements to end things, understanding that your life is going to end. For those of us that are grieving, that have lost loved ones, we're needing to do the exact opposite. Someone we love is gone and we need to now learn how to live again. We need to learn how to design a new life and embrace and face a landscape that doesn't include our loved ones. So our life doesn't end. Just a new life is beginning, and facing that new life without our loved one and knowing, how that affects our identity, how that affects our happiness, how that affects, finances. There's so many things that it affects. And that is the task that those of us that are grieving are faced with. So I would argue it's a completely different process. I also don't like the model because they tend to imply that it's a linear process, that once you go through one phase, you move on to the next phase, and then you move on to the next phase until you just end in a place of acceptance. And again, this has not been my experience or the experience of any of the clients that we work with. Grief is all over the map, and you may in one day do all of these 5 stages. It is up and forwards and backwards and sitting still and all that stuff. The other thing that I would contend is you can reach a place of acceptance, or what we would call recovery, and you can still have depression show up. You can still have anger show up. See, grief comes at different times in different forms and in different levels of severity. And it's obviously more intense right at the beginning, but then depending on what you do and the amount of time is going to determine how often and the severity that grief continues to attack you or torment you or just mess with you, for lack of better terms. So in my opinion, what people need when they're dealing with grief and loss is an arsenal of tools and resources. And they need to develop some practices and develop some skills so that they are equipped to deal with grief whenever it shows up, however it shows up, whether it's big, small, that they're able to handle it. And simultaneously, they need to, we all, if we're dealing with grief and loss, need to learn how to take really good care of ourselves, be self-aware, have really solid boundaries to give ourselves the space and time for healing. And we do need to do some processing of the loss. We need to really grapple with, what does this loss mean for our lives? What does it mean for our identity? How can we possibly move forward in a place of healing and hope and strength? That is the processing that we need to do. But we also, like I said, we need to just have a tool belt of different tools, because it will come at you in different ways, in different shapes. And it's not at all a linear path. It's not at all a linear progression. And so I just wholeheartedly disagree with this model of care. And I just wanted to put this video out there in case, you know, you're new to grief and loss and you don't know where to begin, which was my case and story. When I lost my mom to suicide, I couldn't find help. Nobody could tell me what to do. Nobody had any tips for me. Nobody had any help for me. And if this is the only help you find, the 5 stages of grief and loss, I just want to issue a cautionary warning that I don't find that to be helpful or realistic. Now, if you are looking for support, I would love for you to connect with us. We have a free group on Facebook where we're doing teachings like this all the time. We have other tools and resources. We really base our programs in the how-to of grieving. What are the things that you need to do? What are these tools you need to have on hand? What are the skills you need to develop to effectively deal with grief? And then how can we process the loss in a way that's healthy and gets us looking forward to the future? That's what we do. So we do have, as you know, the YouTube channel here is free resources. We have free resources in our Facebook group, Grace for Living After Loss. And then we also have a team of coaches who work with people you can go through programs with other people or work with a coach one-on-one, but entirely what we're here to do is to help you move through grief and loss and get back to living a life that you love. So I would love for you to connect with us. We'd be happy to share with you about upcoming groups and programs. But mostly, if you hear nothing else from me, please understand that healing and recovery is possible. It isn't instant and it isn't easy, but it is possible and it is worth it. So I encourage you and implore you to do whatever you need to do, research whatever you need to research to find the tools and the programs that's right for you, and then do the work until it's done, because you have the rest of your life to live, and your loved one and all of us want to see you live a life that you actually enjoy. So myself and all the other coaches at Grace for Living for Loss will be cheering you on every step of the way. Until next time, guys, we'll see ya.